Imagine a modern nation quietly plotting to resurrect one of history's greatest empires, stretching its influence from the Mediterranean to the Middle East and beyond. The fall of the Ottoman Empire in the early 20th century left a void that reshaped the Middle East. Europe and North Africa and Turkey emerged from the ruins as a secular republic under Mustafa Kemal Atatürk's vision dismantled the empire's religious and imperial structures, replacing them with nationalism, modernization, and a strict separation of religion and state. Despite the republic's success, the memory of the Ottoman Empire never truly vanished, lingering in culture, traditions, and political imagination. As Turkey modernized, a subtle nostalgia for past glory simmered beneath the surface, occasionally influencing domestic politics and foreign policy. When Recep Tayyip Erdogan rose to power, he tapped into this dormant longing, promising not just economic growth, but a return to influence reminiscent of the Ottoman era. His government began invoking Ottoman symbols, reviving historic architecture, and projecting Turkey's presence in former Ottoman territories through trade, culture, and diplomacy. The concept of neo-Ottomanism emerged, blending religion, nationalism, and strategic foreign policy into a vision of regional dominance. Turkey's soft power expanded through television dramas, international aid, and political alliances, creating the impression that the country was quietly building an empire without firing a shot. By the mid-2010s, Turkey seemed poised to reclaim a leadership role across the Middle East, North Africa, and the Balkans, reshaping geopolitics and its image. Yet, just as the dream reached its peak, a series of setbacks from wars to political isolation derailed the ambitious plan, demonstrating that reviving an empire in the modern world is far more complicated than it appears. When Recep Tayyip Erdogan entered national politics, he quickly gained a reputation for bridging Turkey's modern aspirations with its Ottoman heritage. He presented himself as a leader who could restore Turkey's influence both at home and across the former Empire-SC territories. Erdogan's early tenure as Istanbul's mayor showcased his ability to blend modern governance with cultural nostalgia, renovating historic sites while improving infrastructure. These moves signaled that his vision was not merely political, but also deeply symbolic, tapping into centuries-old Ottoman pride. The term neo-Ottomanism began circulating as scholars and journalists noticed. Erdogan's emphasis on Ottoman imagery and rhetoric, his government increasingly celebrated Ottoman history through public events, monuments, and educational programs aimed at rekindling national pride. Turkey's foreign policy also reflected this shift, moving away from strict Western alignment toward a more independent and ambitious regional role. Under Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoglu, the zero problems with neighbor strategy sought to expand Turkey's influence without direct confrontation. Economic development became a tool of soft power as Turkey invested in former Ottoman lands, sending engineers, contractors, and businesses abroad. This approach allowed Turkey to build connections and influence far beyond its borders without traditional imperial conquest. Cultural influence was equally important, with Turkish TV series like Darilik Ertugrul spreading Ottoman nostalgia across the Muslim world. Millions of viewers in the Middle East, North Africa, and even South Asia consumed these dramas, creating admiration for Ottoman history and Turkey's contemporary leadership. Turkey's humanitarian efforts in Africa, Asia, and the Balkans further strengthened its image as a benevolent regional power. Aid programs, construction of schools and mosques, and disaster relief positioned Turkey as a modern empire of goodwill. Erdogan's political messaging emphasized Turkey as the natural leader of the Muslim world, blending religion and nationalism into a unifying vision. This vision appealed to millions, both domestically and abroad, who felt nostalgic for Ottoman influence and frustrated with Western dominance. By the early 2010s, Turkey had established a strong regional presence through a combination of economic investment, cultural diplomacy, and religious outreach. Many analysts began describing Turkey as the rising power, attempting to fill the vacuum left by declining regional powers. Turkey's economic boom in the 2000s gave it unprecedented tools to pursue its neo-Ottoman ambitions. Turkish construction firms, airlines, and defense companies became instruments of influence across the Middle East, Africa, and the Balkans. Erdogan's government strategically used trade agreements to strengthen ties with former Ottoman territories, fostering economic dependency and goodwill simultaneously. These efforts allowed Turkey to expand its influence without provoking direct conflict with global powers. Religious outreach became a key pillar, with Turkey supporting Islamic organizations, schools, and charities in strategic regions. The goal was to position Turkey as the moral and political leader of the Muslim world, echoing the Ottoman Caliphate's role centuries earlier. The Arab Spring provided a unique opportunity for Erdogan to project power, as political upheaval created openings for Turkey to expand influence. Turkey supported friendly regimes and movements, including the Muslim Brotherhood, hoping to shape the political future of Egypt, Tunisia, and Libya. Turkish diplomacy also aimed at the Balkans, where shared Ottoman history and cultural ties facilitated influence. Investments in infrastructure, education, and religion allowed Turkey to subtly increase its presence in countries that had been part of the Ottoman Empire. Media played a vital role in shaping Turkey's global image, with state-backed news outlets highlighting Turkey's successes while promoting Ottoman nostalgia. This soft power strategy created a perception of Turkey as a benevolent empire, reviving old glory in modern ways. Erdogan's vision also extended to Syria, where Turkey sought to shape the outcome of the civil war in its favor. By supporting opposition groups and controlling refugee flows, Turkey aimed to secure a strategic advantage in a critical region. Turkey's growing influence alarmed both regional and global powers, signaling that its ambitions were more than symbolic. Countries like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Israel watched Turkey's moves with suspicion, fearing the resurgence of Ottoman-style dominance. Despite international skepticism, Erdogan's domestic popularity soared as citizens embraced the new Ottoman vision. The combination of economic growth, cultural pride, and religious symbolism resonated with voters, creating a strong mandate for regional ambition. By 2015, Turkey's influence appeared to be at its peak, with a global footprint in multiple continents and a cultural resurgence reminding the world of Ottoman heritage. Many observers believed Turkey was on the verge of achieving a historic revival, seemingly unstoppable in its strategic expansion. Turkey's rising ambitions soon provoked a backlash from neighboring countries, disrupting Erdogan's plans. Nations like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE viewed Turkey's actions as neo-imperial and began countering its influence diplomatically and economically. The Syrian civil war became a turning point, revealing the limits of Turkey's power projection. Erdogan's support for opposition forces initially seemed strategic, but quickly escalated into a complex conflict involving Russia, Iran, and Kurdish groups. The intervention of Russia in Syria complicated Turkey's plans, forcing Erdogan into uneasy negotiations with a former adversary. At the same time, the rise of Kurdish militias along Turkey's border created domestic security concerns and undermined his expansionist goals. The attempted coup in 2016 shook Turkey to its core, exposing vulnerabilities in Erdogan's control over the military and institutions. In response, Erdogan launched purges and tightened his grip on power, shifting the government from ambitious expansionism to survival mode. The political instability weakened Turkey's influence abroad as allies questioned its reliability and critics exploited its internal chaos. This marked the beginning of the end for Turkey's near-imperial ambitions, showing how quickly momentum could shift in the modern geopolitical landscape. Economic pressures further limited Turkey's ability to project power, with inflation, currency, devaluation, and rising debt constraining foreign ventures. Erdogan's government had to prioritize domestic stability over international ambition, slowing the neo-Ottoman project. Turkey's soft power strategy faced setbacks as cultural exports lost credibility and regional allies began distancing themselves. Programs that once extended Turkey's influence now struggled to maintain relevance, signaling a decline in the country's global appeal. Even domestically, Erdogan's narrative faced challenges. As citizens began feeling the economic strain and political unrest, the combination of internal and external pressures demonstrated the fragility of attempting to rebuild an empire in the modern world. By 2018, Turkey had transitioned from a rising regional power to a country grappling with isolation, economic turbulence, and strained alliances. The dream of reclaiming Ottoman-like influence was slipping away, leaving Erdogan to focus on consolidation rather than expansion. Turkey's neo-Ottoman vision ultimately collided with geopolitical reality, highlighting the limits of ambition in the modern era. Isolated from former allies and facing distrust from both the East and West, Erdogan's empire-building project felt economic decline exacerbated Turkey's challenges, with the leader's collapse and high inflation reducing the country's ability to invest abroad. Strategic initiatives in Africa, the Middle East, and the Balkans became increasingly unsustainable, eroding previously gained influence. Military interventions, particularly in Syria, strained resources and created new conflicts without achieving long-term strategic gains. Russian involvement in U.S. sanctions further curtailed Turkey's regional leverage. Undermining the Neo-Ottoman plan, Erdogan's domestic consolidation replaced ambitious foreign policies with nationalism and survival taking priority over imperial revival. Large-scale purges tightened media control, and political centralization signaled a shift from outward expansion to inward focus. The dream of a revived Ottoman sphere gradually faded as regional powers resisted. Allies distanced themselves, and global dynamics shifted. Turkey's ambitions, once seemingly unstoppable, were halted by the complex realities of modern geopolitics. Even cultural and religious strategies that had previously Turkey's influence could not compensate for economic and political setbacks. The combination of internal and external pressures demonstrated that empire building in the 21st century is far more challenging than in centuries past. By 2020, it was clear that the attempt to recreate an Ottoman-like presence had failed, leaving Erdogan's vision as a cautionary tale. While nostalgia for the empire remained, Turkey had to confront the limitations of its ambitions in a world dominated by complex international relations. The final lesson was stark. Empires cannot be revived by rhetoric, culture, or strategic positioning alone. Global realities, economic constraints, and regional resistance define the limits of power. Turkey's near-imperial dream ended not in battle, but in the quiet collision of ambition with modern geopolitical constraints. The story of Turkey's attempt to revive the Ottoman Empire is a tale of ambition, vision, and the harsh realities of modern geopolitics. What seemed like a historic opportunity quickly became a reminder that the past cannot simply be recreated by willpower or strategy alone. Erdogan's new Ottoman vision captured the imagination of millions, blending culture, religion, and politics into a narrative of national revival. It was a bold attempt to restore influence and power without resorting to traditional conquests, using diplomacy, soft power, and economic leverage as the tools of empire. For a brief period, Turkey seemed unstoppable, projecting influence across the Middle East, North Africa, and the Balkans. Investments, cultural exports, and political alliances suggested a modern empire rising quietly from the ashes of the old Ottoman glory. But every grand ambition faced limitations, and Turkey soon confronted economic turbulence, regional resistance, and international skepticism. The Syrian conflict, diplomatic isolation, and internal political challenges exposed the fragility of even the most well-planned strategies. The attempt to build a neo-Ottoman sphere ultimately failed not because of a single mistake, but because the world had changed. Borders, alliances, and global power structures created constraints that no amount of nostalgia or ambition could overcome. Yet, the echoes of the Ottoman Empire still shape Turkey's identity and foreign policy today. Erdogan's vision may have faltered, but the dream of influence, pride, and leadership remains alive in the hearts of many. In the end, Turkey's near-imperial journey serves as a cautionary tale about the limits of power and the challenge of balancing history with modern realities. The Ottoman Empire may be gone, but its shadow continues to inspire caution and define the ambitions of a nation that once ruled much of the known world.